meeting to order. I don't need to do a motion to do that. Okay, great. Well, I'm calling this meeting to order at 10:05, I guess. Good morning, everyone. I'm Amrys Williams. I'm the subcommittee chair of the Community and Organizational Engagement Subcommittee. I think its name changed from outreach to engagement somewhere along the line. Because I was feeling like, I don't know the name of my own committee, but the name had changed. So now I feel a little bit less terrible about that. And I think I've got it down now. Do we want to take just a minute to do introductions or reintroductions, since it's been a while since we've met? Or do we feel like we all know each other? It's a small group today, so. Good morning, Merle.
We can do a quick introduction.
Okay, great. Well, I'm Amrys Williams. I am the executive director of the Connecticut League of History Organizations, which is in the process of becoming the Connecticut League of Museums. And yes, I think that's all I'll need to say for this morning. I'll kick it to Liz.
Hi, I'm Liz Shapiro. I run the Connecticut Office of the Arts and Connecticut State Historic Preservation Office, which includes 4 museums in the Department of Economic and Community Development.
Great.
I'm Doug Lord. I'm the outgoing president of the Connecticut Library Association. The association has 5 officers, so I will become past president and probably a permanent addition to this commission by CLA. I also direct the C.H. Booth Library in Newtown. Andy.
Hi, I'm Andy Horowitz. I am a history professor at UConn and the Connecticut State Historian. Scott.
We can't hear you, Scott. I think
well,
Scott
we can see you're somewhere beautiful,
either.
but I think you need to put your mic to your face or plug in.
So Scott is at Flo Grizz.
Oh, nice. Okay.
You're on here.
No, there you are.
There you are. I don't know. That was just not working. Technology. Anyway, Scott Wants, Deputy Director Grants and Programs, working out of Flo Grizz today and looking at the Lieutenant River while this meeting's happening. So there are worse offices in the state by far.
Absolutely. Very nice, Scott. Who's next? You want to kick it to somebody, Scott, or should I call?
Go, Merle.
Good morning, everyone. I love that. Merle McGee, she, her, hers. President and CEO of Everyday Democracy. Really glad to be able to be here. I pass to, I believe, Maisa.
Yes, Maisa, thank you. I'm Maisa Tisdale, and I'm the president and CEO of the Mary and Eliza Freeman Center for History and Community in Bridgeport.
Great. Hey, Cyndi, I guess you're last.
Yeah, Cyndi Tolosa.
Certainly not least.
Oh, I'm okay with being least. Development officer at Connecticut Humanities and the project manager for this commission.
Thank you, Cyndi. I would just want to recognize all the work that Cyndi and the rest of the CTH staff have been doing behind the scenes to make my work as the chair easy, organizing the meeting, reminding me to get minutes out and comply with FOIA. So a special thanks to Cyndi and CTH for doing that. So I think the main thing that I wanted to talk about in our meeting today, and I mentioned this briefly in our email, is sort of getting toward, I think, which is, as I understand from Cyndi and our subcommittee chairs meeting a couple of months ago, sort of our main task in preparation for the next full commission meeting is to submit our action plan for 2023-2024. So as a part of this, I thought we could revisit sort of item 2 on the agenda, which are all sort of things that we have discussed at previous meetings, but that was like back in January and it's been a while. So I thought it might be worthwhile just to take a little time as a group to do some work, refamiliarizing ourselves with our charge as a subcommittee, thinking about right sizing. Essentially this is kind of a part of the action plan template that Cyndi and CTH staff put together as a result of the listening sessions and the action plans that came out of that. And, just really clarifying, because there was kind of a hold on having subcommittee meetings until now, how often we want to meet. We've already brainstormed a bit, I know, about, people we might want to reach out to. And I know that since we had that brainstorm in January, there's also been some sort of work on the back end to create a forum on the Connecticut 250th website that people can express interest. So that can be sort of a part of our discussion, I think, about the composition, what we're doing, and who's at the table. So in the interest of doing that, I thought I might just screen share in case, is everybody in the document right now, that the action plan? I can drop a link in the chat, or would you prefer me to just share my screen so we can all be looking at it together?
Can you drop in chat? And
Yeah, I sure can.
Both.
Let's see. So this is the doc. Again, you'll need to be accessing this through your ct250.org Google account if you have many of them. But I see a lot of people in there already. So if we can all just look at it together. So this is the action plan template. And it begins with our charter to reach out and provide assistance to municipalities and nonprofit organizations for the development of programs, projects, and activities pertaining to the American Revolution. Using relationships with municipalities and nonprofits, connect the work of the commission with Connecticut's communities. I don't know if this is there are some particular bullet points that came out of the executive order as well that are a part of this charge, which I won't read out aloud since you all have it, I think, in front of you right now. Is everybody in the document?
I am. Amrys, I had a small note on the charter. Can we adjust that? Or is that set?
I think that we can. No? Yeah, okay, we can do that. We can't adjust presumably the executive order, but presumably we can adjust our aims.
I was just going to point out that we've been talking about this not as activities pertaining to the American Revolution, but pertaining to the anniversary of the Declaration of Independence and the Revolution, the founding, whatever, but it's not just Revolutionary War related events.
Yeah, that popped out to me too as well upon rereading it, Andy. Do we want to suggest some other language there to, I think as a commission, and I think this came out in particular, Cyndi and I were at the regional gathering at Fort Ticonderoga last week. And I think one of the things that we had been chatting about was the ways in which I think Connecticut's commission in particular is trying to make this not just about, celebrating an anniversary, but about, encouraging civic conversation among all communities about how they connect to sort of the American project, which I think is a bigger thing than just what's described here. I don't know, Andy, if you have language that you want to recommend there that the group could review, or if others have wording that they would suggest to,
Just as a way, I try not to make a suggestion without a critique without a suggestion, but I'm not wedded. But I think the simplest thing would just say American Revolution and its legacies. But I am, I don't feel strongly about that. I just thought it should say something besides revolution.
Yeah.
It sounds like an elegant and simple solution. And also, I don't contribute a whole lot, but I am thrilled to say that when I saw that line, I was like, oh, I think that might need more things. Like, I am totally not the brightest bulb in this pack, but I'm so thrilled to hey, my instinct was actually right there.
We're all brilliant.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. We are. So I've just made that quick edit. Does that seem capacious enough for everyone? I think it's certainly a very simple way to rework it without tons of wordsmithing. Everybody got a thumbs up on that? Okay, great.
It's probably a situation where if this feels later, it isn't quite right, we can change it again. You know what I mean? I think so.
All right, well, let's move on to other business then, if we're all feeling good about this. I'm definitely into accomplishing stuff and moving forward today. I was looking at my agenda. I was like, we've talked about almost all of these things before, so we need to do. I would like to think about about the size of the committee. I know we don't have everyone here today, but this was something we were asked to think about as subcommittees. At the chair's meeting, what is sort of we'd like to be, I think, both inclusive and effective. So right now we have, count here. Sorry, I'm going through all of my 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 commissioners on this commission, and representatives from CTH, and we have proposed at least as many again, and perhaps more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, at least a dozen more individuals, I think, where names came up at our January meeting as people we could potentially reach out to. That outreach, as far as I know, has not happened yet, as we were asked to, sort of wait before doing that outreach. We also had generated a list of groups and others that we might want to think about reaching out to bring them to the table. So I think, if we reached out to all of those, we'd be looking at a commission that was more like 20 instead of 10, a subcommittee that was more like, 20 people instead of 10. But I'd like to get a sense of the group on how, what the right size is before we become so unwieldy that, there's social loafing and everybody feels like it's somebody else's responsibility to do stuff, or, just the size to be effective, while also both demonstrating and signaling our openness to bringing a lot of perspectives to the table here.
Okay. In the interest of, I'm not sure that I want to continue on this committee. So I'm kind of listening today. Just want to let you know that.
Okay. Well, I'll be sad to lose you, Maisa. I always find your insights very useful, but I totally understand. There's a lot going on, right?
Just to throw a number out there, I would throw out the number 12.
Okay.
Not for any reason other than to just get the ball rolling.
Okay.
And this is a funny intervention maybe, but perhaps it makes sense to talk a little bit more about what we're going to do before we figure out what the correct membership is.
Great.
No,
That
12.
sounds good.
12 is it.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Just who do we need at this table to accomplish what tasks, and who's going to be accomplishing those identified tasks?
Yeah,
be something I would be interested in knowing.
Okay, great. That sounds good. So I think that maybe what we can do then is move to sort of item 3 on the agenda, and move back to some of these more nitty-gritty specifics, like, numbers, meeting frequency, et cetera, once we have a clearer sense of what we'd like to accomplish together. There are 2 things. So this brings us to, does that sound good to everyone? Sounds like where we're headed to. Okay. So if we're all looking at the action plan, I've scrolled down to, essentially the 2 goals that came out, and I believe these came out directly from the listening sessions that were conducted earlier in the year. We are, as hopefully I think we understand, like, these are just 2 that came out of that. We should think as a subcommittee about the specific goals that we have, and if there are adjustments to these that we would like to make. As I think I pointed out, these virtual listening sessions are the ones that were already completed, as was the IDA workshop with commission members. Although I think, having listening sessions or other ways of gauging community interest or doing community outreach might be something we'd like to consider for further down the road. So I think we're probably more focused on goal 2 here right now. Although, I think it's not like we have finish this first goal of uncovering and sharing stories that represent all the people of Connecticut, past and present. I guess I just wanted to point out that those first two action steps have, to some extent, been completed. So these are two interrelated goals, I think, but I would like to hear some conversation about both of these, and especially the sort of structure, because I think this is something that, you know, has been floated in a number of different ways about what kind of, if our goal is community and organizational outreach or engagement, how are we going to do that? What are the mechanisms by which we're going to do that sort of outreach? We've had conversations about using municipalities, or at least having a representative in each town across the state. This was something I was hoping Denise would be at this, so she could talk a little bit more about her vision for that, while also thinking about the potential problems with using just, you know, sort of town representatives. Liz, go ahead.
Thanks. So I have a question. Have we, there are some municipalities that have already created these commissions.
Right.
And so I'm just wondering if we have a list of those, and if that might be some kind of a jumping off point to sort of, I don't know exactly what, but to see what's working and what's not, because I think ultimately there's not one structure that is going to work for every municipality. Right. And that also legislators should definitely be made aware of what is happening in the municipalities they serve, because we've all seen how important it is that they know what's going on in order to like punctuate funding and things like that. So
yeah, I know that Litchfield and Norwich have already begun work. I don't know if Cyndi has more information about that. I do not have like a systematic survey that I can provide you, or concrete data, although that's something, maybe that's something that this team wants to do together. You know, I think many of us are well positioned to do that. Cyndi or Scott or anyone else at the table, do you have other subsequent information? Oh, Scott's putting something in.
Well, you go first, Cyndi.
I will say that the only other place that I know of that has a local commission established is New Milford. Okay. We are working on getting information out at local fireworks celebrations and parades. I have a stack of wonderful rack cards that we're distributing to some of our congressional representatives that will be handing them out for us. And are hopeful that maybe we can get a better sense of who is out there thinking about this already. And if there aren't people out there thinking about it, get them inspired.
Great.
I think, you know, in addition to that, I'm trying to post the link to the AASLH technical leaflet on forming a local 250th commission. I'm wondering if that's the kind of thing that the commission and the subcommittee might want to consider doing, having an opportunity for like a lunchtime info session where that could be the basis of a conversation. Those communities, as Liz mentioned, that have already started commissions can be invited to be there and talk about the kind of structures that they've put together and be examples for other communities of how this work has already started in our state. And then we could be priming other communities to do this work and letting them know how they can let us know when they have one, because we want to be communicating with communities going forward over the next several years, and use that as an impetus to generate this kind of work happening.
Great. I like that idea.
There must be, there must be a master list of like every select person or mayor or whatever. Is there a list that goes to 169? When we do when the website is ready for like a formal announcement, it seems like an email that just says, here's the website, there are resources on it. Please, you know, and probably Amrys, all of your membership too, and sort of anyone, just any name we can put in it, and ask people to sign up, you know, designate somebody in your town. It could be more than one person, whatever, and not be too precious about whose name gets on that list, and just let that be our point of contact. Then we will hit all 169 and hopefully heard from people. I mean, this is the most obvious suggestion, but just to make sure we do it.
I think that it's going to be an and, not a one approach. So I think having a list where people can sign up is like, yes, 100%. But I do think that, and not even just one webinar with information, but I think depends on who, right? You open emails and invitations from the people that you work with regularly. So people in municipal levels might work with the Council of Governments, right? They might open emails from Connecticut Main Street if they're a Main Street person, or, arts organizations open them from the Office of the Arts, museums open them from Connecticut Humanities and the right? And then there's all the others. I mean, there's legislative email, there's a million email lists. So I think that maybe it's multiple, a couple of webinars just to see, that are hosted by a couple of different organizations that speak to different constituencies. And I wouldn't leave out like Everyday Democracy speaks to other constituencies, right? Like we all have certain constituencies, and some may be more valuable than not.
And to that point, not only do we need to reach different groups through different communication channels, I would encourage this group not to be like your community can only have one point of contact, because then we start getting into political games. I think if a committee wants, a town wants to have multiple 250th groups doing work by this group, great. Just let us know how to reach you so we can tell, and we're not going to start choosing which group in the community is the one that we're officially designating as your community's group, because that could get real ugly real fast.
Yeah, I mean, that feels very right to me, folks. And I think that means that perhaps we'd want, for the purposes of the document at least, to sort of modify action step 1 from being like identify one liaison in every town and city to, develop a robust mailing list that includes people in every town and city in Connecticut across multiple constituencies, or something like that. Does that sound like the direction that we're headed? And then we can, think about schedule and like how we get, I think some clear concrete steps have been suggested using all of our existing networks as the people at this time. This is presumably the reason that we're on this subcommittee, is that we each have these statewide networks that overlap and intersect, but together in some, or know the people who do have the other networks that give us a much more complete coverage of the different kind of folks around the state who might be interested in being involved. And then using perhaps the interest form on the website to kind of like refine that list or identify the people who are most engaged. Are those a couple of sort of concrete steps that sound like what we're talking about here?
Maybe on the website you can say, here are the groups or organizations or entities that are involved in this commemoration in your city or town. And that way also people can choose who they have the most affinity with. And I think you'll get more participation that way.
Great. That is a great idea, Maisa.
Yeah, that's a fabulous idea. And it inspires me to want to say a very basic suggestion that maybe instead of quantifying the benchmark as 169, it should just be something that refers to communities, because somebody may not identify most strongly with the specific, little town they're in, but rather some other organization that is, that they feel membership with.
So one thing I just want to say, because I think this is the way I would recommend, and I'm glad that you all are thinking this way. I'm concerned at some point we might get money. I'm hoping we'll get money that will then be available for every community. And then we're gonna have to start figuring out how we start distributing money to a community. If we've got $10,000 for Basra or something like that, and there's 4 groups from Basra, because Basra is going to be a hotbed of this. I can just tell.
Basra is always a hotbed. Part of me wants to say, and let's worry about that when the time comes. Just because no matter how much we plan and how many scenarios we plan for, they never end up working exactly how we think. So I like casting a really broad net, because
Yeah.
that's the point, right? The point is that if your community doesn't want to have a commission, it doesn't matter, because you can still be part of this. You know, and in some ways, this, you know, the commission thinking is very old fashioned, right? Like, that is seriously, you know, it's a thing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's maybe organizes things, but it definitely is not an inclusive way to necessarily do it, even if you instruct people to be inclusive.
Merle.
Yeah, I think that's really true. And it allows people to, you know, choose according to their interests too. I mean, the way that we'll be commemorating as opposed to celebrating this, you know, I mean, we were still enslaved, right? So, and all of the voices from Connecticut that were Black from that time are talking about how come we're not citizens? How come we can't vote? How come on and on we served? And so our conversation will be different than, say, the DAR. And so it lets people still participate and, you know, commemorate and sort of declare their oneness as a nation, but with different themes. So yeah, different organizations will have different themes, and that will make it more diverse.
I'm thinking about a couple of things. One of the things that Jonathan and I are working on in the IDEA subcommittee piece is sort of putting together a rubric and then a toolkit, right? So we're kind of thinking about like, how might people be supported, encouraged around those ideas. And this makes me think, related to the process of community engagement, if it would be valuable to think about what are the values that underscore the process, which then creates the platform on which you actually invite people into the process of exploring how do they plug in, right? Whether, again, that's through institutions, community groups, individuals. And so I'm just kind of wondering about, would that be a helpful process to think about, so that there's the opportunity to be as expansive as possible. And then, you know, to Liz's point, and Maisa's point, you don't have to think about all of the specific details because you've created the container with which people can be held. So that, you know, you don't have to think about everything. You can think about the container.
I like that notion. So for the purpose, so does that suggest sort of an action step or a benchmark as a part of this process to you? Like, you know, sort of clarifying the values, underscoring our process? And if those, I mean, I guess I'm also wondering about the use of our time, because as the commission, we've also developed a like value statement, right? We were working on that. Are you suggesting that we sort of develop something sort of similar for within the subcommittee? Or maybe I'm just not understanding exactly.
Yeah, no, I think so. I think there's a values statement, which then removes the sort of, it helps to shape, right, what is the metric to help us understand if we're actually accomplishing the task, as opposed to being specific and saying 169 liaisons, you know, from every city. It's sort of like, well, what does representational and inclusive, right, participation in this context look like? What is that metric?
Mhm.
Is it, you know, is it a raw number? Is it, how are we actually determining
Yeah.
that we're actually reaching the broad scope? I guess that's where I'm going.
Merle, I think this is so important, both as like a logistical step to make sure that we, you know, the container idea I think is really bounding for us too, but also in terms of making sure that we that we have this sort of suite of programs and activities that we want. This is like putting one thing ahead of the other. Cyndi knows I took the I took the liberty of proposing a revision to the guiding values statement, not to change the substance at all, but simply to try to transform them from bullet points into a paragraph so they looked like the mission and whatever. And we're gonna, I think, circulate that at the next meeting. It may not work, but one of the things I happen to have in front of me, one of the things that I pulled out as a sort of opening sentence, I'm going to put in the chat, and I'll tell you why I'm
And
sharing.
I actually threw the whole thing in the chat.
Oh, okay, great. So that first sentence, that the events are going to be celebratory, analytical, commemorative. Like, I just wonder if the benchmark might be something along the lines of like encouraging events and programs and activities that are celebratory, commemorative, analytical, like, you know, that we're to make sure that as the engagement subcommittee, we're supporting activities that do these various things. You know, I want to be really careful about language that suggests that every event has to be everything. Like, I don't want to suggest that, you know, to Maisa's, you know, incredibly salient point, like, we don't want to tell the gathering of enslaved, you know, descendants of enslaved people that they have to be celebratory, you know, that every event has to do everything. People should recognize the anniversary in the way that feels authentic, meaningful, and accurate, you know, to the truth that they're representing. And I think as the commission and as the subcommittee, we want to make sure that we're supporting different groups to do the kind of event that makes sense within the bounds of things that are respectful and accurate. You know, we're not going to support things that are disrespectful or inaccurate, but there's probably, you know, the difference between the fireworks and the bracing engagement with enslavement, you know, like probably all have to be encompassed in what we support. So maybe we just want to say, make sure that the events that we're supporting generally fall into that spread. I'm trying to think in terms of benchmark language to Amrys's point. Is this, Merle, is that responsive to what you mean?
I mean, I think it provides a container, right? Which I think is what's important, because what we know is that if you don't provide a container, you can get things that maybe you really don't want associated with this commission, right? As a part of, you know, and something that's being explored. So I think a container in that way, but I'm also thinking, right, can create a container around what constitutes a benchmark around the spread of people who are involved as well, you know, or the invitation to folks that are involved as well. I don't know. I'm trying to build on the idea. It's still, you know, circulating there in my brain, but it's really for me about this question of how do you signal, you know, how do you create a container but make enough space for it to be expansive, even if it is within certain limits?
Yeah, I think the value statement looks good. And I also I think I understand what you're saying too, Merle. I mean, if you take Bridgeport, for example, which was not a colonial city, right? I can see where maybe bordering towns might think, well, you know, this is the way you celebrate it because we're a colonial town and we existed at that time. And Bridgeport has lots of, you know, immigrants and all kinds of newcomers and different, you know, we speak 160 languages in the city of Bridgeport. And so what does this mean to people here with both an industrial and immigrant heritage? And so I think that I can understand what you're saying in terms of that container and just making sure that people aren't sort of defined out. So I think both the value statement and I think the point that Merle is making are both really good.
And just one thing to let everybody know, I have drafted kind of a very rough approvals criteria that I'll be sharing with the agenda tomorrow that will be up for discussion at the July meeting. Part of that does include that any event supported by the commission will be aligned with our guiding values. In addition to being accessible, equitable, inclusive, and supportive of diverse voices and perspectives. Events should be nonpartisan in nature and should align with either one of our themes or one of the direct charges in the executive order. So I will be sending this out tomorrow, and then we will all be discussing it together at that meeting. But I just want to give you all a heads up that there's something drafted, but it will need to be cleaned up, I'm sure, once everybody's input has been taken into consideration.
I'm just going to reflect two things. One, I think this idea of having a benchmark that's in a container that we haven't, it's very cool, but it's not something I've ever seen, tried to figure out before. So I'm not surprised that we're struggling with figuring out how to actually make that sound or look or see. The other thing is I think this value statement looks good. I also think that people are not going to read it, or if they read it once, maybe they're gonna, I feel like it's very academic. I mean, it's good. It's not that it's not good. I just feel like we may just, and this is a messaging maybe piece of this, we're going to have to message this in a rubric that people can quickly understand and check the boxes, like, you know, be kind, be respectful. I don't know what the words are, but you know, if you would be pissed off if somebody did this to you, I always go back to the golden rule. If you would be pissed if somebody did this to you, then you shouldn't be doing it to anybody else, right? That's what we want in our events, because people, this is just a lot to digest.
Because I totally agree. And just to say where this came from is this, I took the bullet points and tried to just put them into a paragraph form, and I did not feel comfortable working on my own, changing any of the actual language, but I hope that you'll make, I'm glad, I don't mean to put this on anyone else. I'm glad to go back and try to do some more work on that front. If you make that suggestion again at the meeting in July and we get some, you know, specific words that we're comfortable with endorsing as a commission.
And it might be, this is what is there, but then there's just marketing about like, here's that, you know, square of check boxes. Like before you put this event on, check, just check those 3 things. Does it go through that test? And I know it's reductive. I know it's problematic, but this is just going to be hard for lots of people to figure out.
I wonder if there's something programmatically that we can do also, either as a commission or through the organizations that we represent, to, you know, help with that messaging work, you know, to whether it's elevating programs that, you know, encompass these, that we see encompassing these values, or offering examples, or otherwise, you know, having just a forum to talk about, like, to present the value statement and what it means to us as a commission and what we're hoping it will do, like in that interpersonal way, bringing the language of this paragraph or bullet points, however it ends up, kind of more down to earth for people. That might be another way, because I think you're right.
If I could just say how Jonathan and I are thinking about the IDEA piece is that we're putting together a rubric that's right. There's an assessment in the toolkit, and then there's a rubric that's like, hey, are you, you know, measure this or whatever that, right? I mean, people don't have to use it, but it's a guiding principle. There may be a need to create, right, a rubric around the engagement and commemoration things that's a guidepost for folks, And maybe if there are funds to be distributed, that some of the incentive around those, getting those funds are that the what is being proposed, right, meets the rubric, right? So you're kind of influencing as you're sort of creating, space for people to create the program, programmatic pieces that they want. Obviously, I think accurate, respectful, and accessible should be, standard, but we live in an interesting time. So, okay, it's not interesting, a horrifying time.
So my question would be then, do you expect every activity to achieve IDEA goals and objectives, or that the commemoration overall as a state would achieve that? I also liked your idea of funding that gave extra, like if there are grants or funding that you get extra points for, your inclusiveness. I just don't think that it's probably realistic to expect everyone in every town to achieve IDEA goals, especially since we're so segregated as a state.
100%. And when Cyndi, when you read some of that quick thing, I was like, oh, that is going to be problematic.
I mean, it doesn't mean that people shouldn't shoot for that.
No.
But you shouldn't shoot yourself if they don't achieve it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what we're looking to offer is guideposts, and the degree to which people accomplish that, is the degree to which they accomplish that. But I think that being able to incentivize the accomplishment is where you kind of want to go. Like you, I know that people left to their own devices are not, they're not going to do it. But I think to the degree that there's an expectation, and to the degree you can incentivize that and hold that as a part of, and then offer support as folks try to do it, one could. Imagine that we would get a greater uptick in that IDEA, philosophy, I guess.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly.
I'm going to just add one thing, because this is just like, again, the way things work in Connecticut, and I don't know how I can prophesize, right? But I can't say I'm sure. So this commission, and I agree. So I think that funding should be dispersed in a way that would reflects the ideals of the commission. What I know is going to happen, 100% sure, is that as we get closer to 2026, legislators are going to create budgets where municipalities are going to get funded, and organizations are going to get funded for their own 250th celebration. That is going to have nothing to do with any of the values that we want to portray. It is simply not going to happen. And because I've never seen it happen, so I'm just not optimistic that this will change anything. So I think it's just I'm just putting that out there, understanding that sort of the complications of all of this is how the commission is true to its values, but does not create division, right, among the people that potentially get funded or are participating through the activities or whatever the values of the commission end up being, versus the people who are getting more money probably, and I'm going to tell you that right now, to do their own thing directly from their legislature in the budget. So this is what I am prophesizing is going to happen, and I just feel like we need to acknowledge that, because it's always what happens.
So what is the opportunity then to do the work of this subcommittee to bring along the legislatures that are going to be, you know, distributing money? Like, should that be a part of the work as well? Like, are they a part of our constituents as the community, as a part of the engagement, right?
So I think
subcommittee, yeah.
I think they're 100%. I was going to ask who is on the subcommittee. They are weird to work with in general because they are in and out. So they don't have a long, unless they find something that they love, they don't have a long landing spot. So their ability to actually help is limited. And as long as you could have 70, 100 less powerful legislators with you, if you have 5 that are not, it doesn't matter. Those 5 are going to win. That's how it works. So I've been trying to crack that nut, Merle, for years now. And I try to do, and in my job, I'm closer, right? Because I get to talk to them more, which is great. But I'm also closer because I see actually what is happening and how things happen, which is, there's no rhyme nor reason sometimes, except for relationships.
But we can only control what we do. And I wonder if
That's what,
building towards a benchmark here, that's something like, if we just want to state in our organizing principles here that meet with legislators to educate them about the goals of the commission. And we can be strategic about whether it's people from our subcommittee or people who have the stronger relationships already, that can say, look, we really want to privilege events that bring together, you know, people across what they imagine to be their communities, you know, and those are the events we really want to celebrate. We're going to see people who don't usually talk about the meaning of the United States speaking with each other about what it means to you and what it means to them, you know, and that's what the commission has decided. That's what the governor wants, you know, you to do. Like, we can say that and then they can do whatever they want, but we can take that on as our role as doing some lobbying of that kind.
yeah, I think working with the commissions the legislative commissions, caucuses, sorry, that exist is probably the right way to do that. Arts, culture, tourism, Black, and I think it's still Black and Hispanic, but also the Puerto Rican caucus. I know there's new caucuses divisions, but I'm not up on 100% of who divided where. But I think, you know, working with I would say start with the low hanging fruit caucuses, right? And legislators, and move on, right? That way the lift is, I mean, meeting with legislators is a very heavy lift.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm trying to draft basically like a step, a benchmark or a step here based on this conversation. So there are a few things that I've edited in the document itself. I've tried to sort of adjust action step 1 under goal 2 to not be about identifying those individual like municipal points of contact, but doing something more of what we described. Would you say like meet with legislator, or do we want to include sort of municipal leadership here as well? Or do we want to kind of focus on state legislators through the caucuses, as you suggested, Liz, to share with them the values of the commission and maybe just hear from them the way they're thinking about this, if they're thinking about it at all?
I think municipal leaders through the, through the webinars that we've been talking about, through the COGS or through whatever, through Main Street, through, whoever we want to use, but the legislators are a little different. But yes, I think it would be great. It would be great to hear, great to see what they're thinking.
Yeah.
Well,
I think go ahead.
I'll share that Denise is planning to present to each of the separate COG groups. And we've been in contact with the Connecticut Council of Municipalities and the cost. I can't remember what something like small towns.
Council of Governments. Well, yeah, there's.
Yep. So CCM, cost, the COGS, and they're all kind of in hiatus for the summer. She reached out to them in May, but those will be happening in the fall once they're all kind of back on board. And also, in addition to that, this summer we are planning, and by we, I mean some of the CTH staff are planning to visit some of the different revolutionary sites around the state and invite legislators, local leaders, and commission members as well, to participate in those efforts to kind of get these conversations started and start to develop networks.
Cyndi, I mean, obviously that's fantastic. And I just wonder, in part to Maisa's point, can one of those meetings not be at what would traditionally be thought of as a revolutionary site so that legislators can see, like, this is what we could do in Bridgeport, like this is how we would commemorate the 250th in a community of people that was not here in 1776 or whatever, you know, like, let's show them something awesome so they can get excited about, you know, a different vision than the one they might have.
And I'll say one of the places we've been talking about is the Pequot Museum to kind of talk about Indigenous people and what the Revolutionary War was for them. So I think we are thinking broadly. We're starting with the low hanging fruit, kind of the forts and the killer taverns, but also thinking beyond that.
Yeah.
And just as one example, Cyndi, Jason, and I were at Fort Trumbull earlier this week. It was not because of the 250th, it was because of a grant application at CT Humanities that was unsuccessful, but it obviously tied nicely into the work of the 250th Commission. And man, they need money. I mean, they've got spaces they can't open to the public because they've got lead paint remediation that they need. They've got mold issues that they can't open up certain spaces in the fort. And because it's a state-owned property, unless the state starts to invest in its own property, that site is not going to be at its full potential for the future. So we were talking about, we've got to get some legislators out here to see what the status of some of their own places are.
It's deep. So don't call it the state.
Okay.
It is the agency that runs the property.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also thinking to your point about diversifying the places, right, where people think about, you know, again, this goes back to what we did to edit our charter at the beginning. This isn't just the American Revolution, that it's, you know, the American Revolution and its legacies, issues about freedom, right? You know, there are a lot of places around Connecticut that connect to questions about freedom and democracy that are not revolutionary sites, but that I think should, at least in the values of the commission, as I understand it, and I think the people around this table should be a part of the conversation. So, you know, I think choosing a site like that is really important. Because it demonstrates, it doesn't just say in the value statement, it demonstrates, like, here's, you know, that, you know, what we could imagine if we were doing this in the way that we are hoping. Andy, I want to put you on the spot for a second because you shared a really interesting idea with me when we met earlier this week about like a radio spot. Do you want to just share that with the group here? Because I think that was a really
sure. The one, I mean,
I think to what we're kind of talking about.
Yeah, so
further down the road, but
I am new in my position as state historian. I've been trying to figure out, not in my commission role, but in my state historian role, what the 250th, what this thing's going to mean to me and my work. And one of the things I was thinking about, I'll tell you what the idea is first, and then I can explain why I'm interested in it. But I've been thinking about a radio series where I talk to people who are reflective of the diversity of Connecticut about what the revolution means to them by presenting them with excerpts from primary sources from the late 18th century and having them, you know, read them and reflect on them in sort of pithy radio pieces. So it might be, you know, the mayor of New Haven today reflecting on something the mayor of New Haven wrote in 1776. It might be someone in prison reflecting on words about freedom. It might be an Indigenous person reflecting on statements about Indigenous people made by, you know, colonists in the 1770s. And the idea here is to foreground archival work and primary sources from the 1770s, but also to see how they, you know, to make them central to a conversation that's taking place in the present about the legacy of the revolution, and to let people hear Connecticut history on the radio in all different kinds of accents and in all different kinds of places that we don't normally think, like the American Revolution doesn't necessarily go to this accent or this location in the state. And let people hear that that is where the sort of work of commemoration is happening in different. Anyway, I just thought it was an interesting sort of mosaic of experiences and reflections. I haven't started working on this at all, so if this sounds terrible, just somebody tell me before I do it, or if you have ideas, I'd welcome them. But that's sort of what I'm thinking about right now as what I might do, is one of the things I might do as state historian for this. Did I say what I was supposed to say there?
yeah, no, thanks. That's great.
Okay.
and, you know, I think to me, this this goes back to something that, you know, we're obviously not going to have time in this meeting to really, you know, flesh out, but I think can be one of these things that in Liz's spirit, we can kind of push down the road as something we want to talk about. I mean, one of the things that I think I understand from the AASLH's field guide and some of their goals around advocacy, we've kind of been talking about advocacy like through the back door here, and sort of, you know, thinking about legislators, helping them understand the goals and values. But, you know, what you were just saying, Scott, about your visit, about your site visit, you know, I think it's an opportunity to highlight to people who control the purse strings the importance of the cultural sector in Connecticut, you know, in advance of, you know, an important commemoration, you know, whether it's talking about collections that are endangered because they're like the Historical Society has no money, or whether it's sites like the one you visited that like can't let people in to tell the really great stories that could happen here. Raising awareness, this is one of AASLH's goals, raising awareness about history and what historians do, about history organizations and their needs. And I would broaden that to more than just history organizations, but, you know, all of the kinds of groups that we're working with and engage with ideas about the past, about democracy, about civics. So I think that might be something this group might want to think about, because I think it fits into some of our broader goals, and is clearly something that we can do either explicitly or, you know.
I have a comment, and, you know, it might not be something that can be done in time, or even maybe you think it's too controversial, but Walter's AME Zion Church, which is the third of 3 buildings that are directly tied with Little Liberia, has been put on the market by the congregation because they haven't been able to restore it since it got hit during Superstorm Sandy. So, and they also don't have a place to grow. But anyway, that church is an 1890s church on an 1848 foundation, and it has an 1832 cornerstone from the original structure. The minister in that church was on the same circuit with the minister in Frederick Douglass's church, and he talks about this man being his mentor. The church was founded by the grandsons of Nero Hawley, who was at Valley Forge with George Washington. He was an enslaved man in what is now Trumbull, the famous Hawley family. When they had to come up with someone to go to war, they sent their enslaved man, Nero, and he went to Valley Forge, and they freed him as a reward. I don't think his family was freed for like another 20 years. But anyway, that church, because those of us who love it don't have money to buy it or preserve it, is likely to be demolished. And it's one of the few structures that speak to you know, what it was to live in the antebellum North in a Black and Indigenous community. So it's a rare survival, but how much longer it will survive, no one knows. So it's really, it would be great to talk about freedom in front of a church that was built for that purpose in a community that was established and is one of the oldest, was one of the oldest free Black communities and settlements in the nation. It really is an editorial comment in itself.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Maisa. I was really interested in what you shared yesterday at the Freedom Trail meeting about that. So, I mean, it seems to me that would be like an obvious place to have one of these gatherings, right? You know, to raise awareness both about the site, but also about its endangeredness, you know, sooner rather than later, right?
Definitely.
Yeah. I'm aware of time, and I know that people may have other meetings to jump to. you know, so I feel like we have some action steps developed here that probably need a little wordsmithing, but, you know, I think I've tried to do some work, and I've seen others doing a little bit of work in the document as we've been going to kind of adjust the template to meet what we've been talking about. You know, we have this whole additional idea about kind of the sort of legislative outreach that we can do to raise awareness that we can put into here. Cyndi, can you clarify what we need to have for the July meeting?
I was just about to
whether we're
say
going to have time to work as a subcommittee at that meeting?
We will not have time at that meeting. It will just be the agenda is fairly packed, and we'll have kind of bigger, broader discussions. I think it'll really just be an update from the subcommittee to the broader commission. None of the other subcommittees are really at the point where they've been able to really flesh out this action plan yet. So I think everybody is still in kind of the discussion and thinking phase. So I think we have plenty that we discussed during this meeting to share with the broader commission. And I tried to point out a couple of places where I think that we have some overlap with some of the other subcommittees and support from them for the ideas that we've had. So I think that will be the extent of what is discussed at the July meeting. And then in October, we'll have the opportunity to go in a little more deep.
Okay, great. Do we want to revisit the questions from sort of item 2 in the agenda about right sizing and what was the other thing? Like, oh, how often we want to meet, or do we feel like we're not ready for that?
We're sticking with 12.
Okay.
I do like monthly.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe I'm.
Oh, we could do every other month too. That's like between monthly and quarterly. I don't know what, you know, I think.
Is this a legal, let me ask you, is this a legally binding, like if we write this, are we committing to something that we can't adjust as we go?
Good question.
Because we can always, you know, cancel a meeting or schedule one if we need one, just to say, we don't have to. We
For
can
my
put something down.
calendar,
We can say every other month and then schedule or cancel as necessary.
for my calendar, since I'm scheduling into August already, it's easier to hold dates. So I'd rather hold a monthly meeting and cancel than try and schedule something. It's hard to know how often until we actually know what we have to be doing.
Right.
I agree. I agree with that. And also it's the kind of thing where we probably have more work to do now. And then maybe as things roll, we can scale back a little bit.
Okay.
I was going to say everybody else is doing monthly. So
okay.
If that helps.
It does help keep one's head in the game a little bit more effectively. I think it'll prevent us from sort of revisiting work that we already kind of almost finished, and, you know, that kind of wheel spinning and wool gathering that can happen if we're not like keeping this in our short-term memory. Like I fully admit that I have not been since our last subcommittee meeting. So I'm going to put in monthly and, you know, sort of 12 for now. I think that the other thing that obviously we don't have time today to talk about it more, but and maybe we'll talk more about this at the full commission, is sort of modes of outreach to identify additional people who are not commissioners that we may want to bring onto this committee. Obviously, we'd need to have a conversation as a subcommittee about like who those people would be. You know, 12 is not much larger than we are now, is all that I'm thinking of. And so we'll need to think about that, but I'm wondering if Cyndi can give us an update on where we are in terms of the other subcommittees on like, are people actively doing outreach? What are the expectations around sort of finalizing?
It's varied. I will say that the education subcommittee has about 30 people, and we had about 20 people at the last meeting.
Okay.
That said, I think those people will be involved in varying amounts. Yeah. And right now, the marketing subcommittee, I think, is still 3 people. So wide range. It's really what, and we can always say 12 now and go to 20 in the future if we feel like we need it, or break up into subcommittees depending
Can we
on
have like
what.
an executive, like, can we have like just anyone who we think might ever do anything for us on the committee and then have an executive committee of the subcommittee?
Yeah. There's no reason, no one is forcing us into anything in particular. So whatever works for what our goals are, works for what we need.
Yeah, I mean, I assume that that's kind of how it would go if we enlarged it, is that there'd be kind of a core group of people who are like really doing work, and other people who are, they're primarily as listeners and responders and idea generators, to sort of inform the work that the core, like the commissioners and the core of the subcommittee are doing. That's kind of what I'm hearing from you, Andy. And I think that's a fine model, because it demonstrates our desire to engage with the community, right? Which is kind of what this whole committee is about, subcommittee is about. Okay. I don't know. So I'm wondering if there's someone who's willing to just sort of like work with me on between now and the July 12th meeting on just sort of taking what we discussed in this meeting and getting it into the action plan in something that, we can sort of talk about in a more structured way, even if it's not the final action plan.
I can help you with that. You want to like stay on and see what we can do right now? I don't know what you have to.
Oh yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, let's try to do it right now. Like once.
I think I can do that, Andy.
Okay.
So I guess anyone who wishes to stay on can have that conversation with us right now. It's better to do the work now. Does anyone have, I think in terms of next steps, I think sharing, I'm happy to share I assume I will share at our July meeting what we've been doing. Do you want to come up with, if we're going to meet monthly, does it make sense to have a sort of regular meeting time that we can set sort of right now, or do you think since we have a larger group than this, it makes sense to send out a doodle or just propose a time now, a couple of options now?
I think that's fine. I think really the only person missing are Denise, Kathy, and John. And Kathy, I know, had a competing meeting, and John is on vacation, but said normally this time's fine for him.
Okay.
Denise is fairly flexible.
Okay.
And she just has not gotten back up to speed as quickly as she hoped.
I'm just gonna kind of look at a monthly calendar. Are there days of the week that work particularly well for some of the busiest among us? Or I don't know, Liz, I'm looking at you. You always have a pretty packed schedule. I'm sure everybody else does too.
There's yeah.
There's no good day. Yeah.
Try me. So things are a little bit freer in the summer. So if it's something gets on now.
Yeah. We can, this Thursday at 10 o'clock time is a time that works for me pretty regularly. Thursdays and Tuesdays tend to be, okay, Thursday morning is good for you. We can propose this time.
I'm sorry, I teach Tuesday and Thursday morning.
Okay, so it's not good for you.
No, sorry.
Think about
It would work in July and could work in August, but it won't work after that. But maybe we don't need to worry that far ahead.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would be ideal if we can find a more standing date that works for folks so that we can get blocked off. Because I know Liz's calendar and my calendar get nuts real fast.
Yeah.
I could meet, my class is done at 10:45, so I could meet at 11 on a Tuesday or Thursday, if that helps.
Okay. Does that work for others, sort of in general? Like 11 on a Tuesday or Thursday? I can't, right now I have a standing meeting at 11 on Tuesdays, although it's adjustable. But if we're looking at Thursdays, 11 on a Thursday, okay, great.
I think as long as we don't choose the day a month that the DRSOs meet with Liz, which is the 4th Thursday. Liz, what is the day of the month that the DRSOs meet with you? And you're on mute.
Sorry, I was looking at my calendar. It's the 4th Thursday. But we can just try and then see.
Yeah. I'm just looking at the calendar. I am away in the second half of July. I don't know, do we want to have a July meeting sort of shortly after the commissioner, do we want to look to August? I don't know what, I know summer's just going to be difficult with people having vacations and things like that. I could do a Zoom from where I am. If we did it a month from today, I think 1, 2, 3, 4, we're looking at the 27th. I will probably be away, but I could deputize someone to run the meeting, or I could try and run.
Why don't we go into August? That would be my suggestion.
Do you want to look at like the 3rd, the 10th?
The 3rd at 11 is okay with me. The 10th at 11 is okay with me. Those are both okay right now.
Okay, yeah, then I can get
Do you
this.
want to propose the 2nd Thursday of a month? Is that
Yep.
sort of like a general
Perfect.
sort of standing thing? It keeps us clear of the AASLH conference in early September, which I'll be at. And the 10th is clear for me. Okay, great. So we have scheduled a next meeting. Does anyone have anything else that they want to bring to the table today?
Can I just say back that we just said the 2nd Thursday of the month from 11 to 12:30 is what we're holding? Is that right?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Do we feel like an hour and a half is not, we've done almost an hour and a half now, so maybe more than an hour meeting is good to hold. And then if we, yeah, okay. No problem, Scott. We all need a vacation, so lots of understanding here about getting away and recharging. Okay, well, if no one has anything else, I want to thank you all for taking the time, and this was a really great conversation, and I think makes me feel really good about us all sort of being kind of on the same page about how we want to go about this work. So thank you all for your suggestions. Again, we can use the Google Drive and chat and email to continue communicating with each other about these ideas. So I welcome those insights. And then anyone who wants to stay on and workshop a couple of these things right now, please do so.